Hi, this is Dan Heisman. This is our new video series for YouTube to help you play chess better. In the first video of the series, I talked about some of the things I wanted to do in the series, and I mentioned that I want to feature amateur games. Another thing I'd like to do in the series is play some games out loud against an intermediate computer to show you how a good player thinks and how to take advantage of opponents' mistakes, things like that. So today I'm going to play a game against the ICC computer Beth O. Beth O's comes from the name Beth Ostrowski, which is Howard Stern's wife's maiden name. So when they programmed the computer, Howard was being honored by the ICC. All right, so let's challenge Beth O. I might have to adjust the screen to make it the right size. Let's ask Beth O for a game. Before I start the game, I don't want to play at the 45. Beth O will only play at the 45 speed, but that's a little bit too slow for a short video. So my time management in this video will be not that good. I'm not going to use all my time, which is unusual for me, but we really don't want the video to go that long. So if you notice I'm playing a little bit fast for the time limit, that's the explanation. All right, here we go. All right, Beth O gave me white. Usually I play English. I'll probably mix it up in other videos, but what you want to do is play your book moves as fast as you can. So here, c4, g6, g3, bishop g2. I could play knight c3 here. I could play knight f3. I could play bishop g2. Let's play knight c3. Knight f6. He could transpose into a fianchetto King's Indian here if I want to play d4. Bishop g2. He castles. I could set up a Botvinnik system with e4 and d3. I could play a King's Indian with d4. Let's do Botvinnik with e4. c5. Okay. So now already I could play d5. So let's take a look at that move. d5. If he plays knight to e8, I don't think I can maintain the pawn on e5. He could just play d6. So I don't think I'm going to do that. So let's just play knight ge2 and castle. Knight c6, castle. Queen b3. All right, so that's a non-book move. So I'm out of my book. So when you're out of your book, you slow down. I could AWL his queen. I could attack his queen with something worth less by playing knight a4 and knight d5, but I don't see any real reason to do that yet. I could play for the a3 b4 break. That might make sense. I could just play d3 and f4. That's not bad. d4 looks bad right now. He's got an extra piece on the d4 square, so that's not going to work. All right, so I can play b3. Not bad. I could play rook to b1 and then a3 and b4. Let's see what that would do. Rook to b1. If he does nothing and I play a3 and b4, he plays c takes b, a takes b, knight takes b4. If I play bishop a3, he plays a5. Nothing special yet. Excuse me. All right, so rook to b1 looks reasonable. So does d3, followed by bishop e3 and maybe h3 and f4. A lot of times you play h3 and stop his knight from going to g4, so when you play bishop e3, if I play bishop e3, my b pawn will be hanging. So I have to play rook b1 at some point anyway, but there's no rush to play it yet. If I play d3 and he plays knight to b4, I can play a3 immediately. All right, I don't see anything wrong with playing d3. Let's play d3. All right, knight to g4, that's a computer move. He's just wasting time. If I play h3 and he plays knight e5, I can play f4. These are all moves I want to play anyway. In fact, if I play h3 and he plays knight f4 to e5 and I play f4, I think I'm trapping his knight. So he has to go back to h6 or f6. And that's good for me. So let's do it. h3. Okay, so he's lost a couple tempos. I can't play bishop e3 probably because of queen takes b2, although I might be able to trap the queen. Let's take a look. Bishop e3, queen takes b2, rook b1, queen a3, knight to b5, queen takes a2. Probably not anything happening. All right, so I can play rook to b1. Good handy dandy move. I guess before I played h3, I could have played knight d5 first to hit the queen. I'm not sure that would have helped me that much. Just looking at it now. There's no sense wasting any time looking at something that could have happened that can't happen now. But anyway, rook to b1 looks like a good move. Then I can play bishop e3. Think about what I want to do next. Maybe play queen d2. All right. One of the principles is develop your rook on the same file your opponent develops his queen. Rook to b1. Okay, rook to d8. He developed his rook where I have my queen, except I haven't developed my queen yet. I haven't put it anywhere, so it's not quite the same thing. And of course, he's not threatening d5. I've got 2 pawns on it. If I play bishop e3, I'm threatening knight a4, probably winning a pawn. So he'd have to play something like d6, but he wants to play d6 anyway, so that's that's nothing special. But the bishop usually does belong on e3 in these kind of positions. I could still play for a3 and b4, but as I mentioned earlier, I need an extra piece. All right, I think I'm just going to play bishop e3 and continue my development. Bishop e3. d6, forced because of the threat of knight a4, forking the queen and the c-pawn. Okay, I can play f4, f5 now. That's very standard in this kind of position. The idea is to threaten to open the f file for the rook, or to play g4, g5, and then maybe f5, f6. So I could play queen to d2. I could play f4. Queen to d2 and f4 certainly seem like the logical moves here. If I play queen d2, don't think I see him doing anything. He can play knight d4 at any point. I can't stop that, but that's okay. If I play f4, there's a trick I learned once in this kind of position. If he plays knight d4, if I play f4, I can play king h2 and bishop g1 with the idea of playing knight takes d4. Knight takes d4 is not possible with the knight on d4 because he plays c takes d4, forking my bishop and my knight. But if my bishop's not on e3, then knight takes d4 becomes kind of a positional threat. I could also try to get a knight to d5. I could play knight f4 and then knight d5. He could just play e6 though. I don't really think that's the right idea here to play knight f4. So it's really down to f4 and queen d2. I could play both of them, not in the same move, of course. Let's just play f4 and see what happens. All right, so f4. Bishop e6. So now f5 is going to come with tempo. f5. He moves the bishop, and then I can play g4. He could play knight e5 against that, but I don't think it's a problem. If I play f5 and he takes and I take back, that it weakens his king, then I might be able to play a move like knight f4 and queen g4 if I can get his knight to move. Yeah, I don't think playing g takes f5 is very good if I play f5. So if I play f5 and he plays bishop d7, I can play g4 and then threaten to play g5 and f6. Or I can play queen d2 and sit on it a little bit. if I play queen d2 first before I play f5, I don't think he has any moves that stop f5. He can't play f5 himself. He can't put his queen on the diagonal. He can't put a knight on the f5 square. Yes, he can. He could play knight to d4. Queen d2, knight to d4, f5, g takes f5, e takes f5, knight takes f5. So it might be more accurate to play f5 right away before he has a knight on d4 so that he can't have the option of taking there. Even though if I play queen d2 and he plays knight d4, I can probably just play g4 and f5 and he can't stop me. All right, so there's nothing wrong with playing f5 right away. Let's do that. So let's play f5. f5. Okay, he takes with the pawn. That weakens his king side. Of course, I have to take with the pawn. And he goes back. All right, so knight d4 will hit the pawn, but I can always play g4. And now g4, g5 becomes a threat. His knight would have to move, and then I can play knight d5. So that looks like a good idea. Now I could play queen d2 first so that if I play g4, he can't play h6. That's probably more accurate. If I play g4 and he plays h6, and then I play queen d2, he has king h7. And then I could play h4 and g5, but if I play h4, he plays knight takes g4. So I think it's most accurate here to play queen d2 first and then play g4. If he plays knight d4, I play g4, and then if I play g5, he can't take on f5 because I take the knight. All right, I think that's safe. Let's do it. Queen to d2. Rook b8, again, kind of a computer move. All right, so the plan is g4, g5. If he plays knight to h5 or knight e8, I have knight to d5, followed by f6, and I'm probably winning. If I have the pawn on g5 and the pawn on f6 and the knight on d5, he's in big trouble. I could play bishop h6 first. I don't see that that's the right idea. All right, I think g4 followed by g5 is going to give me a good game. Let's play g4. Rook e8. So now he's preparing to stop me from playing knight to d5 and threatening the e-pawn. Okay, so things are a little more complicated now. If g5, knight to h5, can I just play bishop f3, hitting the knight? Am I trapping the knight? g5, knight h5, bishop f3. If bishop takes f5, bishop takes h5, hits the bishop. g5, the rook on e8 is taking away his retreat square. You're always looking for trapped pieces. g5, the knight can't go to e4, he can't go to d5, he can't go to d7, he can't go to e8, he can't go to g8, he can't go to h7, he can't go to g4. If I play g5 and he plays knight h5 and I play bishop f3, he can't go to g3, he can't go to f4. He can't guard the knight. All right, so when you see a move that you think might win the game, and here I'm thinking that g5 wins the knight for a pawn or two, you don't play it. You take your time and quadruple check it. So g5, can he counterattack my queen? He could play knight d4, then I just take on f6, I'm okay. He would take back with the pawn, hit my bishop, threaten to take the bishop, and then pin my queen to the king. But he can't do that in one move. So that gives me one tempo to move, and that tempo will be enough to stop rook takes e3. So g5, bishop f3, g5, knight h5, bishop f3. If he plays e6, bishop takes h5, e takes f5, and then I just move the bishop to somewhere like f4 or something. Okay, let's do that again. g5. He moves the knight to h5. Bishop f3. Knight to d4. Bishop takes h5. knight takes f5, and then something like bishop f4. Well, I do have to watch out for my h3 pawn. So let's look at that line. g5, knight h5, bishop f3, bishop takes f5, bishop takes h5, bishop takes h3. I can play rook to f3, overprotecting the bishop on e3, bishop g4, rook to g3, and he has to move the bishop back, and I've got the other bishop skewered, so that looks pretty good. So g5, knight h5, bishop f3, bishop takes f5, bishop takes h5, bishop takes h3, rook to f3. Oh, he can't play bishop g4, of course, because my bishop's on h5. So he'd have to play bishop back somewhere. Bishop back to e6 or d7, and I'm in good shape. All right, let's do it one more time. g5. You know, when you see a good move that seems to win, it's a critical move. Don't do it right away. g5, knight h5, bishop f3, knight g3. I just take it off. Knight takes g3. If he plays bishop d4, bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, bishop takes e5, and I'm okay. All right, here we go. g5. Okay, knight h5. All right, I was planning to play bishop f3, but you don't do these things right away. You know, if you calculate A, B, C, and you play A and your opponent plays B, you don't jump on C, you recalculate it. So bishop f3, is there any other way to hit the knight? I can't hit it with my queen. If I hit it with a knight, he trades it. If he takes, after bishop f3, if he takes on c3, I'm happy. I can play b takes c3 and hit his queen. That doesn't, and it also stops his knight from going on d4. So bishop takes c3, not a problem. If he puts a piece on d4, doesn't look like a problem. If his knight goes back to f6, I take it. So I'm looking at bishop takes f5, bishop takes h5. I mean, I could guard on bishop f5. I could guard the h pawn and then take the knight, but that gives him an extra tempo to cause me problems. I don't think that's such a great idea here. I think it's better to just let him get the two pawns and open up those lines on the king side. Bishop f3, bishop takes f5, bishop takes h5, bishop takes h3. I also have bishop takes f7 check, or rook takes f7. All right, here we go. Bishop f3. All right, so he just gives me the knight, and of course I'm going to take it, and as I said before, he's going to be threatening things like rook takes e3 after bishop takes or pawn takes, so I have to watch out. All right, let's take the knight, and he takes with the bishop. All right, so now my f5 pawn is hanging, so I could play a move like bishop e4 to guard it with the rook and the bishop. That looks pretty good. Then I could play knight f4, knight d5, knight h5, queen g2 check. If he moves his king out of the way to play rook g8 check, I'll probably put my king on h1, and I'm in good shape. So bishop e4 looks like a good move. What else could I play? I could play bishop to g4 to close the g file. But later he might be able to play h5 or something. That's perfectly good, but I like the bishop on e4 better. Now the knight could go to e4. The bishop on e4 is blocking the knight, but the knight can go to d5. And I don't have to move the knight. I'm up a piece. So all right, so bishop e4 is just a solid way to play. Let's do that. Bishop e4. All right, king h8. He's going to play rook g1, rook g8. I should probably have my king on the h1 square. If he ever puts his bishop on c6, I got that diagonal guarded. All right, so king h1 may not be the best move, but it can't hurt. King to h1. You know, once you're up a piece, you don't have to find the absolute best move. You just need to make sure you don't make big mistakes here. All right, so he plays rook g8. My plan was to play rook g1, trade off if I have to. If he trades off, he still can't take on c3. I got that plenty guarded. All right, so rook to g1. Knight to b4, not really threatening anything. Maybe threatening bishop c6 in some lines. If I play knight d5, I might be able to take off the bishop. He could trade knights. Well, that's true. Then my f-pawn would be hanging if I take back with the bishop. Knight d5, knight takes d5, e takes d5. A little bit ugly. How about knight f4 first? Knight f4. If he ever takes on c3, I take back with check. I'm threatening knight to d5 or knight to h5. If he plays something to d4, I can take. Knight f4 is good. Bishop h6 is a move. A3 is a move, followed by knight d5. A3, knight a6, knight d5. He can't play bishop takes b2. If he plays bishop e5, I have knight takes e7. All right, they all look good. As I said, everything safe here should be winning. Let's just play a3. A3. He goes back. All right, so knight d5 hits the queen and the bishop. He has to move the queen. I could take the bishop and mess up his pawns. Then I can play knight f4, knight d5. And things are looking bad for him. All right. I don't see anything wrong with that. Knight to d5. Knight d5. He plays queen a6. Queen's out of play. All right, so knight takes f6 is good. E takes f6 opens the e file for him. The bishop on e4 is solid. I can play knight f4. Suppose I play knight f4 right away. Knight on 2 to f4. He moves the bishop. I can't take on e7 because the knight on c6 is guarding it. I think knight takes f6, e takes f6, knight f4, and then followed by like knight d5. If he plays knight f6, e takes f6, knight f4. If he plays rook g5, I can always trade rooks, or I could just play knight to d5. If he doubles rooks, then I can take. Looks pretty good. All right, let's do that. I'm winning. Can't be bad. Knight takes f6. Pawn takes. All right, I can even get my bishop to the long diagonal here. I could play. It's not worth it. Let's just look at knight f4. Knight f4, rook to g5 hits my f-pawn. I could trade rooks. I could play knight d5. If he plays bishop takes f4, then I have rook takes g5. I'm not really worried about that. If I play knight f4, he plays knight e7. Hits the pawn a second time. Guess that's all right. What if I just trade off all the rooks here first? Rook takes g8, rook takes g8, rook to g1. Looks pretty good with his queen on a6. He's kind of out of the game. Then I can play bishop h6 and knight f4 and queen g2 and almost checkmate him. All right. Trade when you're winning. Don't give him the file. Rook takes g8 check. Rook takes g8. Now I'm planning rook g1. As I said, you don't play it right away. Double check, triple check. If I play rook g1, he takes, I take. If he then goes to knight to e7 to hit my pawn, I can always play knight g3 if I have to. Not that I really need to. All right, let's play rook g1. Rook g1. Rook takes. All right, so I could take with the bishop or I could take with the king. Bishop is okay. That lets me bring my queen up to f4 if I need to guard the pawn. I could take with the knight, but the knight's going to go to f4, I think. If I take with the king and he plays knight to e7, I can play knight to g3, or I could even play queen to c3. I could play queen to c3 right away, but he has knight to e5. I'd rather play queen c3 after he plays knight e7 than if he plays king g7. I might even have bishop h6 check, king takes h6, queen takes f6 check, king h5, and like knight to somewhere mate. Okay, so king takes is okay. All right, so we'll play king takes. And he does play knight e7. All right, so let's calculate again. Queen c3, king g7, bishop h6 check, king takes h6, queen takes f6 check. He has to play knight g6, pawn takes g6, pawn takes back. Looks pretty good. All right, queen c3. His queen's out of play. He could play d5 and get his queen into the defensive area. d5, e takes d5, knight takes f5. He could do that. It's not terrible. Knight f4, knight f5, knight f4, knight f5, bishop f5, bishop f5, knight h5, followed by queen g2 and mate maybe. But I guess he has bishop g6. I've got all kinds of good things here. Queen c3 first. Queen c3. d5 to let the queen on a6 guard the pawn on f6. C takes d, knight takes f5. Good for me. Suppose I play knight g3 first. I'm threatening knight h5 and queen g2 and queen g7 mate. But if he plays knight takes f5, I can trade. But he still has bishop g6 in some of those lines. So knight g3 is okay. Knight f4. Let's look at knight f4. Knight f4. He takes on f5. I trade or not, I can play knight d5. Knight f4 takes on f5. He could take either way. Knight g3, followed by bishop h6, queen f4, queen g4. It's practically mate. At some point he has to play d5 to get his queen into the game. Knight g3 guards the pawn, gives me a couple tempos. All right, we don't want to do anything too crazy. Let's just play knight to g3. Knight g3. Queen there. His queen can come back on the dark squares, or if my queen gets too rambunctious, he can come down on b2. If I play queen g2, then knight g5, knight h5 threatens mate. What would he do about that? Queen d8, then knight g5, then queen f8 or queen g8. Queen g2, queen d8. Well, I could play, meanwhile, queen g2. I could play bishop f4. Queen g2, queen d8, bishop f4. Or I could play bishop, queen g2, queen d8, bishop d2 and bishop c3. That looks really, really good. Yeah, that's practically mate. All right, let's play queen to g2. Queen g2. Knight c6. All right, well, he thinks I'm going after the b pawn, which I wasn't. So now knight h5 threatens queen g7 mate. What's his answer? Knight h5. I can't move the king. Moving the h pawn doesn't help. He has no checks. He has nothing. So knight h5 followed by queen g7 mate. I do not see a defense, but when you see a good move, take your time and play it. Take your time, look for a better one. If it's mate, of course, I can't find a better one. Knight h5. I don't see any checks. I don't see any moves that guard g7. He has no king moves. Knight h5. Looks like the end of the game. Going once, going twice, going three times. He has no queen moves. He has no checks. He has no knight moves that guard g7. His bishop's of the wrong color. All right, knight h5. Knight e7, queen g7 is mate. Don't play it right away. I've seen people play fast mates and they go, oh, whoops, I didn't realize this piece was guarding that square. It was a discovery. But here he doesn't have anything. So queen g7 is going to be mate. All right, queen g7 mate. Okay. All right, so hope you enjoyed the game. Hope you learned something. Hope you got some insight into how a good player thinks. It's always good to hear good players thinking. It gives you an idea of what to do. Hopefully enjoy our series. If you like our videos, you can subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Bye.